Alright, so this is my OpenGL C++ program that I'm working on. Currently, this video is going to be about my sectors in my world, and I've managed to clean up the code, make a search function that um, doesn't search every sector. It only searches the sectors around the current sector, or the sector that you're currently in, rather than searching everywhere. And it took me a little while to get it, but eventually I got it right. Um, kept running into some issues with how I was creating the sectors, um, and I had to work around that. But I did, instead of recreating the sectors, I just worked around it. Let's see here. So, and my sector code looks a little bit smaller, except for these if statements that I had to add in because of the to search around the current sector. I had to add some if statements, and I could probably shorten that somehow. I'm not entirely sure yet, but what the code used to look like was about that size right there, about with all the if statements. But what it was doing, it was actually longer than that because it was running through the sectors, every sector in the world. So if you created 1,000 sectors, it would search through 1,000 sectors, and I didn't want it to do that. So what this does is it only it with a little bit of more code here with if statements, I'm able to search through only certain sectors, and those sectors either to the left, right, forward, back, or up or down from my current position or my current sector, and which is my position. Well, the current sector that I'm currently in, I suppose. Yeah, that one. So let's see, what does it do? It does the same thing, but it um, instead of searching every one of those sectors, it just searches the sector next to me. So boom, now it's in this sector, and it's only searching this sector and this sector right now because there's no sector behind me. And I also made it so I can place myself in a specific sector. So if I wanted to start in sector, 0, this is where I am now, then I could set the starting position to sector 0. And I also made the uh, y-axis, or the up and down, uh, available too. So the sectors, now it has stacks, so it has rows, columns, and stacks now, and as many as I want. And right now it only has like, I think it's a 2 by 2 by 2, or yeah, I think that it might be more than that. But if I go outside a sector, then it just keeps searching through all the sectors next to this sector, but it doesn't find it because I'm out of the sector. But eventually, that won't be a problem because that space won't be available, or maybe it's way too far for some reason. But the code works, keeps track. Again, these points are just here to reference right now. This code won't actually be drawing anything. It'll just be using it won't be using OpenGL. It'll just be referenced in an array in which I could access. This is just to visually see where I am, and if it's working. Again, like I think I mentioned that before, it was like a development tool. So yeah, up and down, and it only searches as I release the key or press a key. At this point, I could probably always run it through the code because it's such a small search. Uh, I don't think it would take any time at all to search these sectors. It's only, what, 6 sectors? Up, down, left, right, forward, back. So you're only searching 6 sectors every refresh. That's not too bad. But it does search, it does, oh yeah, if you can see here, this is telling me what sector I'm currently in. So right now I'm in sector 12. Now I'm in sector 9. And go down here, and I'm not sure which one this is. Sector 0? Yeah, so that's a starting position. Anyways, what I do with the code is I created this thing called a watcher, and what that does is it adds up all the points in the current sector. I have 6 points. So if I am outside of a point, if I'm too far from that point, then it will add 1 to that sector. And this is, you can see it's a vector, so I'm keeping track of each of my sectors have a watcher. And if the watcher is equal to 0, when it does all these if statements and runs through the 6 vertices or 6 points and checks and sees if those points are less than or greater than the current point in the world that I'm referencing. So if it's the left, it would be the negative x, right? Would be positive x. Z and y, both those positive, negative. And what it does is I call it and I pass in a camera position, and I'm using a pointer to the camera. That way I don't have to make a copy of the position because it changes quite often. So this way, if if it's changing, I can reference that change. Let's see. So I have the. I still have to change that variable name. I just call it dot. But what it does is adds, or sorry, subtracts the no, add. So adds the current sector position, which could be x to the left in that current sector, plus the camera position. And then if that camera position is greater than or less than, if you're talking about the negative, and that's all done in these if statements down here, then it will add 1 to this watcher for this current sector. And then once it passes through all of the, well, actually, that's how it works, but what it starts with is actually the current sector. So it goes into this function, it searches the current sector that I'm in, and if all of those are equal to, if none of those add up and none of I'm not out of range, then it keeps sector or the watcher for that sector equal to 0, and then returns true that I'm still in that sector, and then it just gets out of that function. So you're only searching 6 things, like keeping watch of those until it changes, and then once it changes, then it goes into this. If that's not true, if watcher is not equal to 0, then it goes down here and it looks at the closest sectors. So the sector left, the sector right, up, down, forward, and back. And those are the only ones it looks at. If you had 1,000 of these sectors, it only looks at 6 of them. And if you are near the edge, it will ignore it. So that's another sector that you don't have to worry about. Like if it's outside the sector zone, if you will, it won't count that. It'll only look at the sectors that are actual sectors and near you. So if you're in the very corner of the whole array of sectors, and if there's nothing to your left, there's no other sector, then it'll ignore that and just search for the other ones that are closest to you. And then what it does is goes, get rid of that. I was just testing. Let's see, where am I? Right here. So then it does the same thing that this function does, which I'm actually thinking about making a separate function for, or not function, it's not function, it's a for statement. So it does exactly what this for statement does, but what I could do is actually take this for statement and plug it into a function that I could call, and have certain, pass along the sectors that I want to search. And that would actually make this smaller. Just thought of that. Actually, I was thinking about that earlier, but yeah, anyways. So it goes through there, and each section it checks the watcher. If the watcher's equal to 0, it's like, okay, well, you're in a new sector, you're in that sector, let's stop searching because we found the sector, and let's set the last sector, which is this current sector, and the current sector to the position that we're now in, and empties everything that I made, and gives me, this returns the true value, or t, which is actually 1, which it could be a true or false statement, but I just decided to use 0 and 1. Probably should make that a bool statement, probably be easier, but whatever. It's the same thing. If it doesn't find anything, it returns a false statement, or a false, well, 0, and then goes back in and searches again. And that's when you're outside the sector that, or there is no sector. You're outside the array of sectors, and you're not currently in any given sector. It'll give you this return value of 0, and then tell me that you didn't find a sector. I couldn't think of even a better way to do this. I mean, I thought of a few ways, but this way seemed like the best way. Um, I guess there is another way you could do it. You could do it in spheres, but the problem with spheres is if you put spheres in sectors, it's a sphere. So there's going to be points in the sector that are void, and when you're in those void sections, what do you do about that? So that's one reason why I didn't do spheres. The cubes seem better to do, um, although there are a few advantages probably to using spheres, but I think you could probably keep track of an object in a sphere easier, um, than you could in a cube. With the cube, I suppose you could get a position of an object that may be flying past in that cube. Probably wouldn't be too difficult. You just take one of the vertices positions and do a distance formula towards the object, and then you know where it is. So I guess you could do that. It probably wouldn't be that difficult. So yeah, I think cubes are the best way to go, um, and I think I'm gonna stay with it and use them and see where it takes me. But recently, I've been getting into using pointers. I've come to a point where I actually need pointers. They're becoming really necessary, and now I'm having to go back in my code and put pointers in rather than uh, not using pointers, because there are things that I need to reference that I can't reference because I don't have access to it. Um, so it's really interesting though that it took me, a lot of code to finally run into that problem, and I was just wondering how far I can go without using pointers. But now I've reached a point where I have to use pointers, and there's pretty much no way around it. And for one, it's probably easier to do, especially if you're keeping the vertex data in a storing it in a place. Because if you want to say, I was going to play around with this, I'm probably going to do it pretty soon, probably the next thing I do. But if I wanted to say I had my combined vertices that I was plugging into my Genesis file to draw, so I have my combined vertices plugged in, to a VAO. Uh, and if I wanted to change those combined vertices and instead of copying like a whole new set of vertices and then sending it through the Genesis file, like doing the whole thing again, I could rather just change the I can reference the address to the combined vertice and change that in some way or form to my liking, and then load that and then draw it right away rather than uh, going through the whole process of sending it through my Genesis file again. And that it's just a big waste of, you're copying something. You're basically redrawing or redefining the whole object, and that you're throwing into the Genesis file. Whereas if you just wanted to reference, if you referenced an address, then you could take that address and change. You could actually take that address, change what you want to change, and then you could either take that address, copy it to change it to something that you want, and then send that through Genesis without going through the motions, which is like the vertex properties, and then arranging the combined vertices again. There's a whole bunch of things in here that can be ignored if I do that. So, and I could reference them from pretty much anywhere that I want. So I think that's something I'll work on next. Pointers and referencing. It's pretty important. So I just wanted to see how far I can go without using them. I went pretty far, but now I need them. So yeah. Anyways, that's the combined vertices, or the sectors here. Not combined vertices. Thinking about different things. Where am I? Oh, I'm still in a sector. Okay. Has it moved me yet? Oh no. Am I outside the zone? Oh, nope. Okay. Oh, I didn't press a key. Ha, I was just using my mouse. So, yeah. Anyways, pointers and stuff next probably. Why isn't that moving? Why? This should be drawing. Oh, it's probably because it's so big. That was weird. Like, seemed like it didn't change for quite a while. Maybe it's just me. I'm way outside the zone now, so it's not even gonna. There we go. Now I'm back in it. Anyways, have a good one.